To start our assembly for P5-16, pretty much need to decide what is going to be the least movable part. So in this case, the base, as its name implies, would be a good place to start. Sometimes you make choices and the part or the component that you the pick may end up being something that wants to move or is not part of our static assembly. So those are fairly easy to change, but if we make a good decision up front, we can move on from there pretty quickly. So the pins. And what I'm looking at is going through a process. We'll insert the base. We'll let it align origin to origin as a fixed component. And then we'll add a pin, the crank, the other pin, and since our pins have the configuration, we'll have the long pin going through, and then the short pins at the knuckles, and a long pin at the end. If you created those as separate part files, then you'll just bring in the short pin and the long pin as needed. All right, so let's get. And if you've created the assembly template from the overview videos, then you can use the assembly inch or the assembly millimeter. If not, then we'll just go into the assembly. So for this first round, I'll use the default assembly, and they should be pretty close. I'm set to start the command when creating a new assembly. I do not have any documents open, so the open documents is empty. So we will browse, and there's one of the components. We'll get over to our working folder and into assignment 2. And when I select the base, it's going to show me the preview. And when I open it, I can move and rough position. But if I come over to the check mark and just tell it to go OK, it's going to put the origin of the base part aligned to the origin of the assembly. So there's the origin of the assembly. I hit the little arrow next to the base and click its origin. They'll be in the same spot. All right, so we have the little F in front of the base, and that is telling me that that is fixed. If it came in, if you drew it on the front plane or you aligned it, then we would maybe want to float it. For this first assembly and going forward, the orientation is not critical. It may not look exactly like the video if you drew created your base part model in a slightly different orientation. The net effect is it will be the same geometry at the end. So I'm going to collapse this component, and then we'll insert a component from the pop-up, and we'll go to the pin. All right, and since I have configurations, my first configuration is to go to the pin long, and that is going to open. So because, let's see, did it, well, the automatic browse wasn't selected, but it jumped in there. So I'm going to drop this close. I'm just going to put it into position. And now if I rotate, I'm rotating with the middle scroll wheel, holding it down, and able to rotate the view. If we're selected on a part, and I left click and hold down, I'm moving the part in relation to the assembly. Or if I come up to the rotate component, which is not the same as the rotate view. Oops, I guess I would have helped to pick that rotate component. Now I'm rotating the component and getting it a little closer to position. When I hit the check mark, it's going to be good. And then I always say that assemblies are going to get you really good at zooming and rotating. So Again, we're going to do the select, control, select. I like faces. You can experiment with the edges. I think faces give a lot more stability and make sense. So, and also if we looked at this from the standpoint of maybe I have an assembly table and I have components, I'm going to only pick up one component at a time and go through the mate relations to another component before I bring in the additional piece components. So I have face selected, I hold the control button down, I select another cylindrical face, and because of the cylinders, they're going to share the same center, concentric. And it's going to rotate into position. And I pick a planar face, hold down the middle mouse and rotate, and hold down the control button. Then I'm going to be able to go coincident. So that's our first mate. This has a minus sign in front of it because this part is able to rotate inside of the bore, inside of the cylinder, and we may not be able to see that rotation. So if I come over and turn on the origins, we're going to see the origin for the base, which is shared with the origin of the assembly, and then the origin of the pin. As I rotate the pin, I will see that horizontal leg of the origin rotate. Right? It's not a critical deal at this point, but if we want to manage that, we'll come over to the to our components list, identify the concentric, and under concentric we can lock rotation. That will get rid of the minus sign. And again, you have to decide how much of an issue it is having that piece rotate. For our first run through and for the assignment, we're going to make this a static assembly, meaning that we're going to fully constrain it to where it doesn't move. So I'm going to stay with the insert components, and it is jumping right into that. So I believe the next one is the crank. And both ends are the same. So let's double check real quick. The crank to the coupler to the follower. So I have my order. So again, select, hold down the control button, select, and go concentric. For this next one, so locking rotation on the little pop-up or flipping the mate alignment, we have two possible solutions, and because this is able to spin, we just added a concentric. If you make that little pause, it will bring up the options that are available in our mate properties. So speaking of mate properties, if we go to the paperclip mate and look at the mate selections, we're doing basically the same thing, but I want you to get used to making those selections and using the context. When we go into the advanced mates, the mechanical, and the analysis, those are going to have a little more functionality. So if you're in the mate properties and we go to coincident, I don't have to hold down the control button. I don't have to select control select. I'm just going to pick on the face, rotate around so I can see the other face, and sometimes this gets a little guesstimate to it. And then I can either hit the checkbox or come over to the left and hit the checkbox. So an advantage here is I can rotate this up, and I'm going to put this in a vertical position by selecting another face. And again, I'm in the mate properties, so I don't have to hold down the control. When I pick, it goes transparent, which can get a little interesting. And then we'll pick, and it goes to parallel. We can't be coincident because this face would have to align, be coplanar to satisfy that coincident. So parallel says I have an orientation, and I can either hit the checkbox there, and then the checkbox over on the properties. And notice I'm not getting any minus signs. So when I go back to make this, to move this from being static, I can identify that parallel as a mate of interest, a mate relation of interest that I would want to suppress or delete, depending on what we're trying to achieve. All right, so the next pin that comes in, I can't put it on this side because we'll be in collision. The software may show that collision, but in reality, in our physical world, we're not going to be able to build it that way and have it perform any kind of function. Well, maybe back and forth, depends on what our motion. We don't have a scope of work to fully define that. I'm thinking this is going to go full 360 degrees and not collide with the base. So I want to add another pin. If we insert components, we would bring in another instance of the pin. This is going to be a short pin. I'm going to go back, however, I'm going to go back to the control button, left click and hold down, and I'm dragging that piece close, and then I'm letting go of the mouse and letting go of the control. So since this is a long pin and we need a short, when I click on it, I'm going to see this selector, and I'm going to be able to pick and accept, and we have the configuration to make it smaller. If you made this as a separate component, then you're going to have to do the insert components, bring in your short pin, and do the same basic process to get to this point. So picking up from having a pin in place, select, control select, and these are going to be concentric. I'm not going to worry about the lock rotation. I'm going to go right into the selecting the face, holding down the control button, selecting the other face, and making it coincident. And then I don't want to flip the mate alignment because that flange will interfere with the geometry. So a lot of this process, again, is going to be picking your geometry, cylinder to cylinder, face to face. My the less favorites are going to be edge to edge, and then point to point. So I will go ahead and bring in the coupler. And the coupler would be along the lines of if you had a second pin. So notice we have the minus sign. That's because this pin can rotate. If we need to, we'll come back and correct those later. So insert component. We would do this for the pin, just like we're doing this for the coupler. And I can hit OK. Comes in position. If it's not in position because of the orientation of the model, we're not going to worry too much about it. As long as you can hold down that middle mouse wheel and rotate into a pretty close position, as you add these mates, these parts will come into alignment. So selecting the face, holding down the control button, selecting another cylindrical face, setting it concentric, and then I can see that face, but I can't see it very well. And the highlight's doing pretty good. So I highlight to that face, rotate over a little bit, hold down the control button, select the other face, go coincident. Alright, so this is going to be free to move. I left click and hold down, I can drag this. So really it's going to be the next couple of components that are going to bring this in. So I'm just holding down the middle mouse wheel and kind of moving this around so I can get a feel for the orientation of the geometry. All right, so if you did the configuration, we need another short pin. Actually, either way, if you have a long pin or a short pin, we're going to pick the short pin, hold down the control button, left click and drag. And I'm going to get it close to its position. If I need to, I can rotate it, but I think the select control select is going to get you aligned a little bit quicker. So select the face and zoom up a little bit. Do not try to pick from zoomed way out and try to fight those faces. So select planar face, select another planar face, and coincident. Okay, and then rotating that around with the middle mouse wheel. Now we need one more new component, which is going to be the follower. So insert and open, and I'm still not seeing where, since that's not telling it to automatically browse. I'm not sure if there's another. If something happens and you're not going directly into the open, be sure to browse to get to those components. All right, so again, getting it kind of close, dropping it in place, zooming up so that I can see those geometries. Select Control, select the cylinder, make it concentric. So that one's a little further out. If I grab onto that face, left click, hold down, and drag, there's going to be some movement because of its ability with the mates. And then select the inside face, select the outside face, and go coincident. Alright, so that's going to be able to move and move strangely. Alright, so just going in sequence, doesn't really matter if I bring in another pin to the end of the follower or back to the base. So let's go ahead and left click. Oh, I missed. Alright, so select, hold down the, I think the follower was still selected. So select and drag and get it kind of close to position. Not sure what it was blinking at there. This one is going to be a long pin, so I'm going to change the configuration. If you have separate parts, you will need to pick whichever one, long or short, however you did the naming for those two pieces. Same basic process, a lot of repetition here. Select the cylinder, Control select the other cylinder, go concentric, kind of move through a little bit. I'm going to drag it back out, just left click, hold down and drag. Rotate over so I can see that face, and pick the face, hold down the control, pick the other face, coincident. Alright, so if this all lines up, my last task is going to be to pick the cylinder and Control select the other cylinder, let it go concentric, and if the stack up is correct, I shouldn't have any movement, because way over here, that first group of mates with the coincident is kind of driving or preventing those from moving outside of the assembly, our assembly mates. All right, so fully defined. Everything is stationary, and we've created a static assembly. All right, so this will be the requirement for the assignment, is to build these in. We could do a little organization over here, maybe make it a little bit easier to read the hardware and the geometry, but this gives us a good first look at the assembly. And there are a lot of strategies and techniques, a lot of tools that we're going to move into, and we'll do that as an optional add-on video.